QASL නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සුවතයි. Tonight, the true cost. The Attorney General's Department informs court of the heartbreaking marine life death toll from the Express Pearl disaster. Double threat. Experts warn of the increased threat of asymptomatic infections.
Even those who got the vaccination will be infected if they are exposed, and probably they will not show any symptoms.
And urge pregnant women to get the jab.
In the third wave, there have been around 10 deaths reported. Delay in seeking medical help has contributed to the death of these mothers.
Making changes. The CAASL scraps its Middle East arrival ban and will only accept PCR tests from tourists from now on. Chasing down growth. Outgoing CCC chairman calls on the private sector to lead the charge in Sri Lanka's push for a resilient economy.
As the engine of growth of our nation's economy, the private sector needs to be resolute in its commitment to remobilize an aggressive growth trajectory.
All this and much more coming up on this Wednesday, the 30th of June, 2021.
Signal charcoal lemon danta lepaya. Suduwan daddipalak labade. Sirilaka sina surakeva.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. Courts today heard the case of the MV Express Pearl disaster with shocking details about the damage caused to marine life being revealed, indicating the magnitude of destruction caused by the incident. The Attorney General informed court today that 176 sea turtles, 4 whales and 20 dolphins have lost their lives owing to this marine catastrophe. Meanwhile, the Marine Environment Protection Authority is still expecting concrete evidence from the salvors regarding the quantity of oil contained in the submerged vessel and ways to pump the oil out if found in the vessel. The case pertaining to the MV Express Pearl disaster was taken up before Additional Magistrate of Colombo Lochani Abevikrama today. Making submissions on behalf of the Criminal Investigation Department, Deputy Solicitor General Madhavathen Nakun revealed that a staggering amount of marine life have lost their lives through the disaster. He informed court that 176 sea turtles, 4 whales and 20 dolphins have perished due to this marine catastrophe. Whilst calling it unacceptable, he rubbished claims that these deaths are a result of the change in seasons. He also pointed out that the 39-member committee appointed by the Marine Environment Protection Authority recommended that these deaths were a result of the environmental damage caused by the fire. Previously, the legal counsel representing the suspects requested an investigation into the recording machine placed in the office of the harbour master in connection with the fire aboard the vessel. In response, the Deputy Solicitor General stated that as per the court order, officers of the CID had inspected the device. The Additional Magistrate then moved to point out that according to the CID report submitted to court today, a technical fault was detected in the machine. In response, the Deputy Solicitor General stated that since the CID officers are unable to read the data in the machine, the officers need assistance of the machine's local service provider in order to obtain data. Meanwhile, President's Counsel Sarath Jayamana, appearing on behalf of the ship's local agent, Sea Consortium Lanka Private Limited, said that the machine contains recordings of all telephone calls made by the ship's captain. Jayamana also stated that the CID did not pay attention despite a number of requests made to examine the messages recorded in the machine and expressed amazement over the statements that the machine's data has been deleted. Through such actions, President's Counsel Jayamana questioned whether the CID was attempting to conceal the truth. He also questioned as to why the harbour master of the Colombo port was not named as a suspect in connection with the incident. Meanwhile, the Deputy Solicitor General told court that investigations so far have not proved the defendants' allegations that government officials allowed the ship to enter Sri Lankan waters despite knowing about a fire on board the vessel in order to obtain compensation. He added that investigations have confirmed that this situation was a result of the ship's captain and the local agent concealing information about an acid leak and the fire. The Deputy Solicitor General went on to say that it has also come to light that a number of emails exchanged in connection with the incident have been deleted by 3 officers of the local agency, adding that further investigations into the matter are underway. In response, President's Counsel Jayamana said that copies of the said emails can be recovered from the accounts of other employees of the company and that the CID would be able to get their hands on those copies without a problem. Having considered all the submissions, the magistrate ordered that the case be taken up again on the 13th of next month and ordered the CID to report on the progress of the investigations when the case is next heard. In the meantime, fishing equipment, including nets worth 2.1 million rupees, were handed over to a group of fishermen who lost their gear during the incident. What's more, the Marine Environment Protection Authority is yet to receive concrete evidence of the quantity of oil contained in the submerged vessel. Earlier, the International Tanker Owners Pollution Federation Limited and the Salvage Company initially submitted their observations to MIPA in writing that the ship's bunker oil may have burnt up. The MIPA, however, says that it called for a comprehensive report with concrete evidence to prove that no oil remains and if there is any oil found on how the salvors plan to pump it out. The salvors in the meantime are currently conducting a survey on wreck removal but are unable to deploy any divers as yet due to the unfavourable underwater visibility and the weather.
ගෙදරකට තේ හදනවා කියන්නේ වෙනම වැඩක්. මැලිබන් තේ ගෙදර පදමට තේ.
Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemant Herat, says that the public have to adhere to safety protocols in public as the threat of infection from asymptomatic patients remains a concern still. Meanwhile, the Health Promotion Bureau urged expectant mothers to obtain their COVID-19 vaccinations to avoid any maternal deaths, as an increase in the number of deaths have been witnessed following the emergence of the third wave.
With strict safety and control measures put in place, the country's health sector was able to prevent maternal deaths occurring during the first wave and second waves of COVID-19. However, the virulent spread of the third wave of COVID-19 that swept across the country following the Sinhala and Tamil New Year has seen an increase in the number of maternal fatalities.
The Family Health Bureau of the Ministry of Health has looked into the maternal deaths due to COVID, and in the third wave there have been around 10 deaths reported. When these deaths were investigated in details, they have realized that delaying in seeking medical help has significantly contributed to the death of these mothers. If any pregnant mother is feeling any difference or any new sign or symptom or any discomfort related to her pregnancy or a change in her health condition, immediately seek medical advice. And the Ministry of Health is offering the COVID vaccination to pregnant mothers in their second and third trimesters and who are having risk factors. Please speak to your doctor, MOH, and get your COVID vaccination.
Meanwhile, during yesterday, the number of COVID-19 infections detected across the island stood at 1,717. The figure included 1,709 infections detected in 24 districts and 8 foreign arrivals. No infections were reported from the Kilinochchi district this time. In contrast, the highest number of cases were confirmed in Colombo with 348. In addition, 280 cases were detected from Gampaha, 198 from Kalutara, 113 from Galle, 93 from Ratnapura, 89 from Ampara, and 86 from Puttalam. The remaining 502 infections came from 17 other districts. All of these infections were detected after 16,943 PCR tests were conducted by health officials. In the meantime, health experts once again highlighted the importance of adhering to health and safety protocols in public, saying that even vaccinated people who may remain asymptomatic could still spread the virus to others who are not vaccinated.
It is possible to spread the disease through asymptomatic patients. That is basically because the persons who are infected with COVID-19 does not show minimal symptoms if their immunity is very high. And however, high immunity or even after vaccination does not imply or indicate that they will be prevented from getting the infection. So therefore, even those who got the vaccination or those who are with high immunity will be infected if they are exposed, and probably they will not show any symptoms. However, since their immunity is high, they are relatively low spreaders, or the likelihood of spreading the disease from these people are low. But if somebody is susceptible, definitely they can get the disease through these asymptomatic patients. That is why we always advise to ensure health measures even when you are working or interacting with so-called apparently healthy people.
Meanwhile, in the country's vaccination drive, 925,242 people have so far received the AstraZeneca first dose. The number of people who have been inoculated with both the AstraZeneca doses as of last evening currently stands at 375,784. In the meantime, the number of first dose receivers of the Sinopharm vaccine as of last evening increased to 1,657,741 after 61,255 people received their jabs yesterday. The number of second dose receivers of Sinopharm now stands at 605,116. As for the Sputnik vaccine, 114,795 people have received their first doses, while 14,425 have obtained both. Meanwhile, the first dose of the Sinopharm vaccine was administered to people aged above 60 years at several vaccination centres established in hospitals across the Western Province. In the meantime, 2,481 COVID-19 patients were discharged from hospitals during the day, increasing the country's total recoveries to 225,952. The country's number of active cases, meanwhile, rose to 30,074 after the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19 confirmed 1,786 new cases today.
The travel ban imposed on passengers with a travel history to several Middle East countries by the Civil Aviation Authority was lifted today under several conditions. Under the new revisions, tourists arriving from those countries under the bio-bubble system will need to undergo strict quarantine for 14 days, while antigen test results will no longer be accepted. The Civil Aviation Authority of Sri Lanka announced yesterday that passengers with a travel history to Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain and Oman during the past 14 days will be banned from entry to Sri Lanka. However, the ban was lifted today subject to conditions.
Considering the present situations, government has relaxed somewhat those announcements and taken decisions to allow passengers arrived under the tourist bubble. They will be quarantined at the hotel for 14 days. And there are some limitations affected to that operations. One of the requirement is to have the PCR test negative report taken within 92 hours prior to the flight time. The antigen test will not be accepted. The PCR test is mandatory. It is the responsibility of the airline to ensure all the tourist passengers are having the PCR negative test report prior to their take on board an aircraft.
Meanwhile, releasing a media communique today, the Department of Motor Traffic announced that operations at the Narahempita and Verahara offices commenced today under strict health and safety guidelines. However, with inter-provincial travel restrictions currently in place, services will be limited only to citizens of the Western Province. The department also informed the public that any clarifications regarding vehicle registrations can be obtained by contacting 070-7677-877. What's more, any clarification on driving licenses can be obtained via 070-7677-977. Meanwhile, several areas were isolated today to control the COVID-19 virus spread. This include the Kanulvela Grama Niladhari division in Monoragala district and the Eladuvatta area in Eladuva Grama Niladhari division of Kalutara district from this morning. In the KAASL district, the Niyandurupola estates 1, 2, 3 and 4 of the Halauva Grama Niladhari division, the Devalakandavatta area in the Kannagama Grama Niladhari division and the Pambegama Vatta area in Godampola Grama Niladhari division were isolated at 6 am today. In the meantime, the Divitura estate in the old Colony Grama Niladhari division of the Gaul district too entered isolation today. Meanwhile, several areas were brought out of isolation today. That includes Minnerithanna Tsunami village in Kalutara district and Upulvasanta road in Simbalapevatta Grama Niladhari division of Gampaha district. Meanwhile, Gramanilladari divisions in Kawuldeniya and Guruvela in the Matale district and the Densworth Vatta in Algura Gramanilladari division of the KAASL district were also brought out of isolation at 6 a.m. today. In the meantime, at a time when weddings and public gatherings have been banned, a wedding party organised in the area of Pallemulla in Panadura was raided yesterday, attended by 20 guests. The raid was conducted by police along with the area public health inspectors following a tip-off.
The public health inspectors have ordered to follow quarantine procedures in respect of 20 persons, including 12 males and 8 females. So they are following quarantine procedures at the place where the wedding was conducted. In addition to that, the police are taking legal action against them under the provisions of Quarantine and Prevention of Diseases Ordinance once they completed their quarantine period of 14 days.
Sri Lanka has received more encouragement for its push to go fully organic, this time from the world's largest organic certifier, the BIODYNAMIC Federation, based in Germany. In a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the Federation's General Secretary, Christoph Simpfendorfer, stated that it stands ready to offer Sri Lanka advice, training and capacity building to help achieve its goals.
The world's largest certification organization for organic agriculture, Biodynamic Federation DEMETER International EV, has commended the Sri Lankan government's initiative to create a green socio-economy and offered its fullest support for the move. In a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, General Secretary of the organization Christoph Simpfendorfer called the appointment of the Presidential Task Force to oversee the initiative an example of the strong decisions needed for the preservation of the planet and public health for future generations. Simpfendorfer said that the COVID-19 crisis has shown nations the dangers of agricultural systems being over-reliant on external inputs, and added that the only way to deal with this issue is with the incorporation of biodynamic and organic farming methodology for more sustainability, resilience and viability. He added that the Federation fully encourages and supports the Presidential Task Force in its push for a sustainable future and stands ready to offer advice, training and capacity building to help achieve its goals.
Sri Lanka Navy joined the sea phase of the Cooperation Afloat Readiness and Training Exercise, an annual bilateral Navy exercise conducted by the US Navy, which concluded today. With an aim of enabling partner navies to refine operations and tactics in response to traditional and non-traditional maritime security challenges, the multilateral naval exercise is conducted among allies and partners in South and Southeast Asia. The Cooperation Afloat Readiness and Training Naval Exercise began on the 26th of this month in Trincomalee. Conducted by the US Navy, the multilateral naval exercise was joined by the Sri Lanka Navy and the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. With the objective of strengthening partnerships between regional navies and enhancing maritime security cooperation throughout the Indo-Pacific, this is the US Navy's oldest and longest continually running exercise in South and Southeast Asia. The Sri Lanka Navy's offshore patrol vessels SLNS Sayurala and Gajabahu took part in the exercise, and the Sri Lanka Air Force provided Bell 212 and 412 helicopters as air assets for the naval exercises. In the meantime, the United States 7th Fleet augmented the exercise with the USS Charleston, a littoral combat ship, and its shipborne helicopters. Apart from that, the Boeing P-8A Poseidon, a maritime patrol aircraft of the United States 7th Fleet, took part in the Air Observer exercise as well. Further, a destroyer and a shipborne helicopter from the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force also joined the exercise this morning. During the process, a number of drills were exercised, including divisional tactics and night steaming exercises. The closing ceremony of this multilateral naval exercise was held this evening. United Nations peacekeeping operations have survived a budget scare today after member nations finally agreed on the $6.5 billion needed to continue operations in 20 missions across the world. As of yesterday, the United Nations was preparing to halt operations if an agreement wasn't reached that would have affected 100,000 international peacekeepers engaged in global hotspots, which include 1,000 Sri Lankan troops and police personnel as well.
The United Nations has narrowly averted a complete shutdown of its global peacekeeping activities for next year after member states reached a last-minute agreement today on the $6 billion budget required. On Monday, fears of a no-deal situation emerged as the UN's 193 members had still not agreed on the peacekeeping budget for the year, which is set to begin from tomorrow, the 1st of July. Some diplomats blame changes to negotiating procedures, issues with logistics and tough talks, pitting China against Western countries for the delay in reaching an agreement. The United States is the UN's largest contributor to the peacekeeping budget, responsible for about 28%, followed by China with 15.2% and Japan with 8.5%. The budget of $6.5 billion will be used to pay for about 20 UN missions worldwide that sees nearly 100,000 blue helmets mobilized, including 1,000 Sri Lankan personnel from the country's armed forces and police. Meanwhile, with the United Nations commemorating 70 years of peacekeeping operations this year, the organization has focused on looking at incorporating best practices in order to deal with sexual abuse and exploitation by peacekeepers operating in areas with vulnerable populaces. Over the past 70 years, more than 1 million men and women have served under the UN flag in more than 70 UN peacekeeping operations.
Welcome back. In your business news, Wish Govindasamy was elected as the new chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce yesterday at the Chamber's first ever virtual annual general meeting. Speaking at the AGM, Govindasamy paid tribute to his predecessor, who he said steered the private sector through a double blow of the Easter Sunday attacks and the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, outgoing chairman Dr. Hans Vijay Surya called on the private sector to lead the charge towards a more resilient and people-centric economy.
Speaking at the 182nd Annual General Meeting of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, outgoing chairman Dr. Hans Vijay Surya called on the private sector to lead the charge and remobilize an aggressive growth trajectory in Sri Lanka's push towards an inclusive and people-centric revival of the economy.
Quantum acceleration of the economy will require, no doubt, a synchronization of public and private sector inputs. The application of policy levers will proxy to needle-moving government contributions to the acceleration of the economy and will deliver disproportionate returns. Efficient and timely execution of mega projects would also serve to move the needle. Sri Lanka stands at an important juncture of its economic and social trajectory. We have, on one hand, the challenge of achieving vertical takeoff from the fulcrum of the COVID-19 downturn, while on the other, having to navigate an escape from the middle income trap. Achieving both these objectives while operating within a very tight fiscal space and perfecting the balancing act between growth and debt is a multifaceted challenge that the private sector and public sector needs to embrace together. Ladies and gentlemen, the call of the hour is therefore to have no forbearance for respondents. As the engine of growth of our nation's economy, the private sector needs to be resolute in its commitment to remobilize an aggressive growth trajectory and to lead the charge towards an inclusive and people-centric revival of the Sri Lankan economy.
Meanwhile, also addressing the virtual AGM, newly elected chairman Wish Govindasamy paid tribute to the dynamic leadership provided to the private sector during a period where the country faced what he termed a double black swan moment.
As you know, the Ceylon Chamber is always called upon to be the clarion voice of the private sector, a voice which is non-partisan, a voice which is raised solely in the interest of Sri Lanka, a nation-first approach. I intend to continue this approach that has been followed by many of my predecessors. Let me take a moment to acknowledge our outgoing chairman, Dr. Hans Vijay Surya. Under his stewardship, we have steered through a very, very difficult period of the country, and the private sector, which underwent the twin black swan events of the Easter Sunday incident in April 2019 and COVID-19 crisis, which began in 2020. I have witnessed and experienced the high level of care he has given the chamber under his leadership, taking the chamber to its new heights. As the first chairman to have taken over this role virtually, I look forward to serving the Ceylon Chamber and the members of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce to the best of my ability.
In your daily market update on the Colombo Bourse, the old share price index ended at 7,837.76 points, following a loss of 18.88 points, while the S&P/SL 20 index of more liquid stocks lost 34.70 points to end at 2,968.26. Market turnover was 1.7 billion rupees. Here's Dimanta Matthew with an update on today's market performance.
Today also we saw a major volatility in the index as the ASPI turned red for the second consecutive day. So the ASPI was down by around 19 points as the index closed at 7,837 points. With this, what we're seeing is that there seems to be an issue relating to the confidence levels of the investors at the moment. Overall, turnover level was around 1.7 billion rupees, a moderate level of turnover, and but the number of transactions were onto the high side, 23,000 transactions, because there was high level of retail activity because of the significant volatility in the index, and some investors were bargain hunting also at that moment of time.
The rupee ended the same as yesterday against the US dollar at 202 rupees and 89 cents. Now let's have a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. Have a good night.